A sharp herbal scent once sliced through the medieval stench. That clean aroma was a whisper of a hidden science. This is the story of the medieval art of making soap, a craft wrapped in guild secrets and guarded recipes. By the end, you will uncover the complete, surprising saga of how cleanliness was crafted in an age of filth. How did a dangerous alchemical process become an everyday essential? Who held the secret knowledge that could turn ashes and grease into a luxury item? What forgotten story does a simple bar of soap tell about the people who made it? What small luxury from history do you think we have most misunderstood? That whisper of clean scent was a luxury few could afford. We often picture the Middle Ages as a time of universal grime, a 1,000-year stretch where everyone was caked in dirt. And it is true, public sanitation was a nightmare. Streets were open sewers, and the concept of germs was centuries away. But the idea that people did not care about being clean is a modern myth. Personal cleanliness and grooming were deeply important, a sign of social status and even spiritual purity. The nobility and clergy went to great lengths to appear fresh. They used linen undergarments changed frequently to draw dirt away from the skin. They washed their hands and faces daily, and wealthy households employed servants to bring them scented water for washing. Public bathhouses, surprisingly, were common in many towns, serving as social hubs where people could soak and socialize. To combat odors in a world without modern plumbing, people relied heavily on aromatic herbs like lavender, rosemary, and mint. They would strew them on floors, sew them into clothing, or carry posies to hold under their noses. Being clean in body was seen as reflecting a clean soul, a virtue preached from the pulpit. So if the desire for cleanliness was there and the social structures supported it, what was missing? The answer is an effective, accessible means to truly get clean. Water alone could rinse away mud, but it could not cut through the oils and grime of daily life. This created a powerful, unmet need. The stage was set not for a world that hated washing, but for a world desperately searching for a better way to wash. And that is where our story turns from desire to discovery, to the alchemical puzzle that would become medieval soap. The search for that better way to wash began far earlier than the castle walls. Soap was not a medieval invention at all, but a secret passed down through millennia. Its story starts in ancient Babylon, where archaeologists have found clay tablets from around 2800 BC, detailing a recipe for a soap-like substance made from ashes and oils. The Egyptians, too, used a similar compound for treating skin diseases and for washing their precious textiles. But the most famous origin story is a legend from ancient Rome. It tells of Mount Sopo, a hill where animals were sacrificed to the gods. Rain would wash down the mountain, mixing the melted animal fat from the altars with the wood ashes from the sacred fires. This greasy, ashy slurry flowed into the clay soil along the Tiber River. Local women washing clothes in that river found something miraculous. This strange mixture made the cleaning process far easier, cutting through dirt they had struggled with for years. This accidental alchemy of fat and ash is the foundational myth of soap. Yet for the Romans themselves, soap remained a curious specialty item. They imported it from the Germanic tribes, who were known to make it from goat tallow and beech ash. The Romans primarily used it not for bathing in their famous baths, but as a medicinal pomade for skin ailments, and remarkably as a form of hair dye. A Roman writer even noted that among the Gauls, a red soap was used to tint their hair a fashionable reddish color. So the knowledge of how to make this slippery, cleansing substance existed, but it was fringe knowledge, a tool for healers and hairstylists, not the cornerstone of daily hygiene. This sets the stage for our true medieval mystery. When the Roman Empire crumbled, its vast networks of trade and knowledge shattered. The elaborate public baths fell into ruin. How did this fragile, specialized recipe not vanish into the darkness? The The survival of soap making through the so-called Dark Ages is the first great puzzle. Medieval craftsmen were not inventors in this case, but inheritors. They became the guardians of a flame that had flickered for centuries, and their task was to turn that flicker into a steady, usable light. The question is, how did they keep it burning? That fragile flame of knowledge was kept alive in a very specific place, the alchemist's kitchen. This was not a grand laboratory with glass beakers, but a smoky, earthy workshop where the soapmaker's craft began with two humble, essential ingredients. Every bar of medieval soap, from the coarse grey block used in a peasant's washhouse to the fragrant olive oil cake gracing a noble's bath, started with just two things: fat and alkali. The magic and the immense difficulty lay in their sourcing and preparation. Let us open that medieval pantry. First, the fat. This provided the very structure of the soap, the base that would hold together and create lather. The most common fat by far was tallow, rendered beef or mutton fat. It was cheap, readily available from butchers, and created a hard, long-lasting bar. But tallow soap had a distinct, often unpleasant smell and could leave a slight greasy feel on the skin. For the luxury market, soap makers turned to plant oils. The most famous was olive oil, which produced a much milder, gentler soap. This was the origin of Castile soap, named for the region of Spain where olive groves were plentiful. Almond oil was another prized ingredient, creating soaps that were not only cleansing but were considered beneficial for the complexion. The choice of fat immediately marked the soap's destination: a practical tallow bar for scrubbing woolens, or a delicate olive oil cake for a lady's private toilet. The second and more mysterious ingredient was the alkali. This is the transformative agent, the substance that triggers the chemical reaction with fat to create soap. Medieval soap makers had two main sources. The first was potash, literally pot ashes. They would take the ashes from hardwood fires, put them in a pot, and run water through them. This leached out the potassium salts, creating a strong, caustic solution called lye. The strength of this lye was unpredictable, varying wildly based on the type of wood burned and how it was processed. The second, more potent and consistent alkali came from burning specific salt-tolerant plants, like saltwort or glasswort, which grew in coastal areas. The burned remains of these plants, called barilla or soda ash, yielded a sodium-based alkali. This produced a harder soap that lathered more easily in water, and its production became a specialized industry in places like Spain and the Mediterranean coast. So the soapmaker's craft was deeply rooted in the local landscape. A soapmaker in a forested region of Germany relied on wood ash and tallow. A soapmaker in sunny Andalusia used olive oil and barilla. Their recipe was a map of their environment, an alchemical blend of what the land and its people could provide. But gathering these ingredients was only the first step. The true danger and the real skill began when they were combined. The alchemist's most dangerous ingredient was not a mineral or a metal, but a clear, unassuming liquid. This was the lye, the caustic heart of the entire soap-making reaction. Producing it was a slow, sacred ritual that demanded patience and a deep, intuitive knowledge. The soap maker would start with a special barrel, often called a lye barrel or a leaching barrel. It had a small hole in the bottom, plugged with straw or cloth to act as a filter. He would carefully pack this barrel with the fine, grey ashes from his hardwood fires, creating a dense, porous column. Then, the most ordinary of elements was introduced: water. But this was not a quick rinse. Over the course of days, the soap maker would slowly, patiently pour soft rainwater over the top of the ash column. The water would seep down through the ashes, dissolving the potassium salts within, and drip, drip, drip out of the bottom hole into a collecting vessel below. This was not a fast process. It could take an entire week of careful tending, adding more water, watching the slow drip to produce a batch of lye strong enough for soap. The first runnings were the most potent, a dark, viscous liquid that could burn skin on contact. Subsequent batches would be weaker, saved for different uses or combined to achieve the right strength. But how did a medieval craftsman without any chemical scales or pH meters know if his lye was ready? This is where the process crossed from craft into esoteric art. He relied on generations of passed-down wisdom, simple tests that seemed almost magical. One common method was the egg test. A fresh, raw egg would be gently placed into the bowl of lye. If the egg sank and lay flat on the bottom, the lye was too weak. If it floated completely on the surface, it was too strong. But if the egg floated just beneath the surface, with a coin-sized patch of its shell breaking the meniscus of the liquid, it was perfect. Another test used a chicken feather, dipped into the solution. If the feather's fronds began to dissolve or curl, the lye was at the correct, fierce strength. This knowledge was not written in books, but in the hands and eyes of the master soap maker. It was a dangerous dance with a corrosive substance, where a mistake in judgment could ruin an entire batch of precious fats or worse, cause serious injury. The transformation was the true mystery. A liquid that could burn and destroy was about to become the key agent of cleanliness. This clear, caustic drip held the paradoxical power to turn grease into purity. With the lye tested and ready, the most volatile stage of the alchemy could begin. Inside the soapmaker's workshop, a massive iron cauldron hung over a carefully banked fire. This was not a place for haste. The master would first slowly melt his precious store of tallow or warm his olive oil, filling the space with a rich, fatty aroma. Then, with a reverence born of danger, he would begin to add the clear, caustic lye to the warm fats, a drop at a time at first. This was the trigger for saponification, the ancient chemical reaction where the alkali attacks the fat molecules, breaking them apart and reforming them into soap and glycerin. It is a violent process on a microscopic scale, and controlling it required immense physical effort and constant vigilance. The mixture had to be stirred, not casually, but with a strong, steady, and relentless motion, often using a long wooden paddle. This stirring was crucial to prevent the lye from settling and creating pockets of corrosive material that could ruin the batch. As the reaction progressed, the cauldron's contents would begin to change. The thin, separate liquids would slowly thicken into a frothy, opaque porridge. The fire beneath was a constant worry, kept low and even. If the heat grew too intense, the volatile mixture could foam up and boil over in an instant, creating a dangerous, corrosive mess and wasting weeks of careful ingredient gathering. The soapmaker's eyes were fixed on the texture of the brew, waiting for the critical sign known as the trace. To test for it, he might lift his paddle and let a drizzle of the mixture fall back into the cauldron. In the beginning, it would vanish without a mark, but after hours of stirring, if the drizzle left a faint, momentary trail or trace on the surface before sinking in, the moment had arrived. This trace meant the saponification was complete. The fats and alkali had married, transforming into a stable, neutral substance. It was the point of no return, the silent confirmation that his skill had guided the dangerous elements into harmony. Missing this sign meant a failed batch, a greasy, separating sludge that could not be saved. But achieving the trace meant he had successfully navigated the perilous heart of the craft. The magic was done, yet the work was far from over, for now this primitive soap had to be coaxed into its final, usable form. Achieving the trace was a triumph of chemistry, but it produced a substance still far from pleasant. The basic soap in that cauldron was a functional, grayish paste with a harsh, fatty odor. For medieval people, this was not enough. Cleanliness was not merely the absence of dirt, it was a state of being, one that engaged all the senses and touched both body and spirit. This is where the soapmaker's craft transcended mere utility and entered the realm of the apothecary and the perfumer. The plain soap base became a canvas, and the pigments for that canvas were grown in the herb garden. The addition of botanicals was never just about masking a smell. Every herb, every flower, every crushed leaf was chosen with intention. carrying layers of meaning from folklore, monastic medicine, and the emerging science of the time. Lavender was perhaps the most beloved. Its fresh, clean scent was prized for driving away unpleasant odors, but its use went deeper. Lavender was associated with calm and purity, believed to soothe headaches and promote restful sleep. A bar of lavender soap did not just clean your hands, it offered a moment of peace, a fragrant barrier against the chaos of the world outside the washroom. Then there was rosemary with its sharp, pine-like fragrance. It was famed as an herb of remembrance, but in soap it served a more practical purpose. Rosemary was thought to have powerful purifying and antiseptic qualities. Washing with rosemary soap was seen as a way to cleanse more than just grime. It was a ritual purification, scouring away miasmas and bad influences that might cling to a person. Healing herbs played a major role as well. Sage, with its broad, soft leaves, was revered for its supposed healing properties for skin and gums. A sage-infused soap might be used by a barber surgeon to clean a wound, or by an individual to treat a persistent rash. And for the ultimate in luxury, nothing surpassed the rose. Rose petals, often from the highly fragrant damask rose, were a symbol of love, beauty, and opulence. Incorporating them into soap was a costly process reserved for the very wealthy. The resulting bars were often molded into decorative shapes and presented as precious gifts, their delicate perfume a direct statement of status and refinement. Integrating these botanicals required yet more skill. Sometimes the chosen herbs were steeped directly in the warm oils before the lye was added, slowly transferring their essential oils and properties into the fat itself. Other times, dried and finely crushed leaves or petals were stirred into the soap paste just after the trace, creating a speckled, marbled effect throughout the bar. In monastic communities, which often maintained extensive medicinal herb gardens, the making of medicinal soaps was a sacred duty. The monks saw the care of the body as part of the care of the soul, and their soaps, redolent of the cloister garden, were physical manifestations of that holistic philosophy. So a simple bar of medieval soap became a layered artifact. It was chemistry, yes, a product of dangerous alchemy, but it was also pharmacy, perfumery, and even theology. It carried the scent of a sun-drenched garden into the dimmest kitchen, offered the promise of health with every wash, and turned a daily chore into a small, sensory ritual. This transformation from a harsh chemical paste to an object of desire and care reveals a crucial truth. The medieval world did not simply want to be clean. It wanted to be well, and it wanted to feel, even in the most humble way, a touch of grace. The transformation of soap from a functional paste to an object of beauty began with color. Beyond the realm of scent, medieval soap makers engaged in a subtle art of visual alchemy, turning their practical creations into small, vibrant works of craft. Adding color was not merely decorative, it was a powerful signal. A uniformly colored bar, free of the gray streaks of imperfectly mixed tallow, spoke of a master's control over the entire process. It whispered of care, of artistry, and of a product intended for more than just scrubbing floors. The palette for this art was drawn entirely from the natural world, each hue carrying its own story and its own technical challenge. To achieve a fresh, verdant green, a soap maker might reach for parsley or spinach. These leafy greens were pounded into a pulp, their chlorophyll-rich juices carefully strained and then blended into the warm oils before the lye was added. This required perfect timing, as introducing the lye too soon could cause the delicate green pigment to break down, resulting in a murky olive drab instead of a bright meadow hue. For a rich golden yellow, nothing compared to the luxury of saffron. A few precious threads of the crimson stigma, steeped in a small amount of oil, could impart a deep, sunny color and a faint, exotic fragrance. A more economical but still lovely yellow came from marigold petals, which were dried and powdered, then stirred into the soap batter at trace. The quest for red led to the root of the madder plant. Madder root produced a range of colors from pink to a deep, rusty red, but it was notoriously difficult to work with. The powdered root had to be meticulously infused, and the final color could shift depending on the alkalinity of the soap itself, a variable the soap maker had to anticipate through experience alone. For earthy browns and tans, crushed walnut shells or walnut hulls provided a reliable and stable dye, often used for the hardier, less expensive tallow soaps intended for laundry. The technique of incorporation was everything. Adding a powdered dye or a vegetable pulp at the wrong moment could introduce unwanted moisture or particles that would disrupt the fragile saponification reaction. A master soap maker learned to add his colors at just the right stage, sometimes steeping them in the fats beforehand, sometimes blending them in with the oils, and sometimes folding them into the thick trace with a deft hand. This visual appeal had a direct social impact. A cake of saffron yellow or madder red soap, perhaps even molded with an intricate pattern from a carved wooden form, was unmistakably a luxury item. It was not hidden away in a washhouse but displayed in a private chamber, a small testament to a household's refinement and wealth. In a world where most possessions were functional and drab, a colorful bar of soap was a rare and personal indulgence. It turned the act of washing into a visual delight, a moment where art met utility in the palm of your hand. But who held the keys to this colorful, fragrant alchemy? The knowledge of turning fat and ash into a cleansing luxury was not free for anyone to learn. It was locked away, protected by one of the most powerful institutions of the medieval world, the craft guild. In bustling trade centers across Europe, from the sunny ports of Marseille to the foggy wharves of Bristol and London, soap makers banded together to form exclusive guilds. These were not just social clubs, they were formidable economic and political bodies designed to control every aspect of the trade, from the quality of the product to the very souls who were allowed to make it. Their primary mission was protection, guarding the hard-won secrets of their craft from outsiders, and ensuring that the reputation of their city's soap remained untarnished. This created a wall of secrecy around the soap maker's workshop far thicker than the stone of its walls. To become a soap maker, a boy, and it was almost always a boy, would enter the guild system as an apprentice, often around the age of 12 or 14. He was bound by a legal contract to a master soap maker for a staggering period, typically 7 long years. During this time, he was not a student in a classroom, but an extra pair of hands in a dangerous, demanding workshop. He would start with the most menial tasks, hauling ashes, fetching water, and stirring the endless cauldrons under the watchful, critical eye of the master. He learned not from books but by doing and by observing the subtle signs, the smell of the lye, the look of the trace, the exact hue of a perfect batch. The master was under no obligation to reveal his deepest secrets, his personal blends of herbs, or his tricks for achieving a consistent color. That knowledge was earned through years of loyal service. Only after his apprenticeship was complete could the young man attempt to become a journeyman, and eventually, if he was skilled and fortunate enough, a master in his own right. This final step required the creation of a masterpiece, a perfect batch of soap judged by the guild elders. It had to meet every exacting standard for weight, texture, scent, and hardness. Failure meant more years of labor as a journeyman. Success meant entry into an exclusive brotherhood with the right to open his own shop and take on apprentices of his own. The guild's control did not stop with people, it extended to the product itself. They enforced brutal quality controls to protect their brand. The most famous example is the Marseille Soap Guild, which from the late 1600s enforced regulations so strict they became legendary. True Marseille soap could only be made from pure olive oil and soda ash from specific coastal plants, with no animal fats or other fillers allowed. Guild inspectors had the right to enter any soap maker's workshop unannounced to check his ingredients and his process. Soap that passed their rigorous examination was stamped with an official seal, a mark of authenticity that customers learned to trust implicitly. An unlicensed soap boiler or a guild member caught using cheap tallow in a batch labeled as pure olive oil faced severe penalties. Fines were common, but so was public shaming, the destruction of his inferior product, and even expulsion from the city's trade entirely. In this environment, a soap recipe was not a piece of paper. It was a living tradition, a sequence of steps and secrets whispered from master to apprentice. It was guarded as closely as a state secret because, for the guild and the city's economy, it was just as valuable. This culture of secrecy did more than control commerce. It wrapped the entire craft in an aura of profound mystery. To the average person, soap did not come from an understandable process. It emerged from behind closed doors, a small miracle of cleanliness crafted by men who knew dangerous, hidden arts. Behind the high stone walls of the monastery, soap-making took on a sacred purpose. While guilds in the cities guarded their secrets for profit, monks in cloistered communities practiced the craft as an act of devotion, a direct extension of their spiritual duty to care for the sick and the poor. Their workshops were not in shadowy alleys but within the infirmary's domain, often adjacent to the very herb garden that supplied their ingredients. Here, the monastic soapmaker was not merely a craftsman, he was an apothecary, blending the practical knowledge of soap with the healing wisdom preserved in ancient classical texts. His goal was not to create a luxury but a remedy. The result was a range of specialized soaps, each formulated with a precise therapeutic intention, a mysterious fusion of faith and early science. One of the most vital recipes was for a soap intended to treat persistent skin conditions like scabies, eczema, or the ulcers that plagued medieval life. For this, the monk apothecary would turn to a powerful, pungent ingredient, sulfur. Known since ancient times for its ability to kill mites and fungi, powdered sulfur would be carefully incorporated into a mild, tallow-based soap. The resulting bar was a powerful, if unpleasant-smelling, medicament. A patient would be instructed to lather the affected areas, allowing the sulfur to work against the infection while the soap cleansed the surrounding skin. It was a harsh treatment, but in an age without antibiotics, it offered one of the few reliable forms of relief from maddening, contagious ailments. For more common pests, the monks devised another clever solution, a lice-repelling soap. Here, the herb garden provided the answer. Strongly aromatic herbs like wormwood, rue, and southernwood, all known for their bitter scents that insects seem to avoid, were dried and finely ground. This herbal powder was then kneaded into a basic soap base. Regular washing with this soap would not necessarily kill lice outright, but its lingering fragrance on the hair and skin acted as a deterrent, making the individual a less appealing target. In crowded dormitories or for travelers on pilgrimage, such a soap was a precious preventative tool, a fragrant barrier against an ever-present nuisance. Perhaps the most sophisticated soaps were those designed as antiseptics for wound cleaning, a critical need in a world where a simple cut could lead to a fatal infection. Monastic recipes for this purpose often included honey, a substance we now know has natural antibacterial properties due to its high sugar content and low pH. The monk would gently warm high-quality honeycomb honey and blend it into a simple, unscented soap. This created a mild, soothing lather that could be used to cleanse wounds, ulcers, or surgical sites. Other antiseptic soaps might be infused with herbs like sage or thyme, which were believed correctly to have cleansing properties. When a barber surgeon came to the monastery infirmary to operate, it was likely a monk's soap that prepared the patient's skin, a quiet act of sanitation born of observation and tradition. This entire practice was framed by a profound theological idea, the unity of spiritual and physical cleanliness. To the monastic mind, caring for the body was an act of charity and a reflection of inner purity. A foul-smelling wound or a contagious skin disease was not just a physical ailment, it could be a barrier to prayer and community life. By creating soaps that healed, the monks were removing those barriers. They saw the healing herb in the garden as a gift from God, and the alchemical process of saponification as a hidden natural law placed within creation for humanity's benefit. Their soaps were therefore more than early pharmaceuticals. They were physical prayers, tools for holistic restoration. In the monk's steady hands, the dangerous craft of the soap maker was transformed into a merciful art, where every bar carried the quiet hope of healing, and the clean scent of the herb garden was indistinguishable from the fragrance of grace. A monk's healing soap was a humble mercy, but in the castles and cathedrals, soap served a very different master, prestige. For the nobility and high clergy, cleanliness was a public performance, a visible declaration of wealth and divine favor. They did not use the coarse, grey blocks that scrubbed laundry or treated ailments. Their soap was an imported luxury, a small, fragrant sculpture that spoke of global trade networks and immense disposable income. This was the world of fine Castile soap, the undisputed gold standard of medieval cleanliness. Its name came from the kingdom of Castile in Spain, where vast olive groves and deposits of high-quality soda ash from coastal plants created the perfect conditions for its production. The process was a refinement of the basic craft pushed to an extreme. Only the purest first-press virgin olive oil was used, never animal tallow. This yielded a soap that was naturally white or pale gold, incredibly mild on the skin, and it lathered richly even in the softest water. The base alone was costly, but the true transformation came with scent. Common herbal soaps used local lavender or rosemary. Noble soaps were perfumed with the very air of distant continents. Apothecaries would grate precious cinnamon bark from Ceylon, crush exotic cloves from the Moluccas, or blend in grains of rare ambergris, a waxy substance from sperm whales that washed up on distant shores. These imported spices and aromatics were worth their weight in silver, and their inclusion was a direct display of a household's access to the spice trade, a network that stretched from the markets of Venice to the far side of the known world. The final touch was presentation. This precious perfumed paste was not simply cut into bars. It was carefully hand-molded into decorative forms. Skilled craftsmen used carved wooden molds to shape the soap into delicate balls, intricate roses, or even figures of animals. Often, while the soap was still soft, it would be stamped with the distinctive coat of arms of the noble family or the seal of a bishopric. A bar of soap bearing the lion of a duke or the cross keys of a papal legate was no longer just a toiletry, it was a portable emblem of power. These objects transcended personal use, becoming tools of politics and diplomacy. A beautifully casket of scented Castile soap balls was a standard and highly appreciated diplomatic gift between royal courts. It signaled respect, sophistication, and the wealth to literally give away such extravagance. Monasteries might receive a gift of fine soap from a pious noble patron, a tangible offering that supported both the soul's purity and the body's comfort. This luxurious product existed in stark, deliberate contrast to the soap of the common household. That soap was dark, often foul, smelling from rancid tallow, and sold by weight in rough chunks for practical chores. The noble's perfumed ball and the peasant's greasy block were made through the same fundamental alchemy, but they were worlds apart. One was art, the other was utility. One was a symbol of a refined self, the other a tool for managing the grime of survival. In this simple division, the entire layered structure of medieval society comes into focus. What you washed with told everyone exactly where you stood, from the scent on your skin to the very texture of the bar in your hand. The perfumed soap of the castle was a world away from the gritty reality of the peasant household. For the vast majority of people, soap was never a purchased luxury, but a messy, annual chore that filled the home with the pungent smell of survival. This was not a craft, but a necessary domestic alchemy, a battle against grime fought with kitchen scraps and fireplace ashes. The responsibility for this daunting task almost always fell to the women of the household, who had to carve out time from endless daily labor to undertake this complex and dangerous process. It began with the most humble of ingredients saved over weeks or months. Every scrap of cooking fat, every bit of grease from roasted meat, every lump of tallow too poor for candle making was carefully collected in a special crock. This was not pure, clean fat, but a congealed mixture of kitchen drippings, often beginning to turn rancid. When enough had been saved, usually in the late autumn after the slaughtering season, the rendering began. The fat was slowly melted in a large pot over the fire, straining out the bits of skin and char to produce a cloudy, yellow liquid. The smell was overpowering, a greasy, burnt odor that permeated the home's single room for days. Simultaneously, another collection was underway. The ashes from the hearth, the sole source of heat and cooking, were not thrown away. They were meticulously saved in a wooden barrel or a hollowed-out log. This was the source of the lye, the dangerous magic that would transform grease into soap. The woman would pour rainwater over the ashes, letting it slowly leach through to drip out the bottom as a dark, caustic liquid. Testing its strength was a moment of profound risk, often using the egg or feather method passed down through generations. One mistake in judgment here meant a ruined batch, a week of wasted effort, and the very real threat of painful chemical burns. With the lye deemed strong enough, the most volatile stage commenced, outdoors if possible, but often by necessity inside the smoky main room. She would carefully combine the warm, rendered fat with the corrosive lye in a large iron kettle. The mixture had to be stirred constantly for hours with a long wooden paddle, a physically exhausting task that could not be paused. The air filled with acrid fumes, and the constant danger of the caustic mixture boiling over or splashing was ever present. A single drop on skin or in the eyes could cause a severe burn. There were no guild masters to advise her, only the hard-won experience of previous failures. After a full day of relentless stirring, if the stars aligned and her skill held, the mixture would thicken into a crude, brownish paste. This was the sign of success. She would then pour this primitive soap into a shallow wooden trough or directly onto a bed of straw to cool and harden. The final product was a far cry from Castile soap. It was a rough, brown or grey block, often still flecked with bits of ash or impurities. It had a harsh, fatty smell and could be drying to the skin. But it worked. This homemade block was the household's sole cleaning agent for the year ahead. It would be used to scrub the family's rough woolen clothes in a wash tub, to scour pots and wooden plates, and yes, for the most basic personal washing. There was no separation between laundry soap and body soap. It was all one and the same. This annual ritual was a testament to a different kind of knowledge, not the guarded secret of a guild, but the essential, uncelebrated wisdom of domestic survival. It was a process fraught with stench, exhaustion, and danger, all for the simple, vital prize of a year's supply of cleanliness. In the peasant home, soap was not a symbol of status, but the hard-earned fruit of labor, a small victory in the endless struggle against the pervasive filth of the medieval world. That annual block of homemade soap faced its ultimate test on laundry day. Far from a private luxury, soap's most vital and grueling role was in the war against filth waged on textiles. Clean clothes were not a matter of vanity, but of survival and social standing in a world where wool, linen, and hemp were precious, hard-won assets. The process began long before the soap touched fabric. For woolens, which most people wore, an initial and brutal step was called fulling. After cloth was woven, it was often loose and greasy from the lanolin in sheep's wool. To thicken and strengthen it, the cloth was soaked in a vat of a special solution, a mixture of water, clay, and crucially, stale human urine. The ammonia in the urine helped to degrease and felt the fibers. Then, men known as fullers would tread the sodden cloth with their bare feet for hours, or beat it with large wooden paddles, literally pounding it into a denser, more weatherproof material. It was a foul, exhausting job that set the stage for all cleaning to come. Only after this could household laundry begin, a back-breaking communal ritual usually undertaken by women at a village wash point, a riverbank, or a communal washhouse. They carried the heavy, soiled garments and the precious block of soap in baskets. The first step was to create a washing solution. They would fill a large wooden tub or a hollowed-out stone basin with water, then take a knife and shave thin curls of hard soap directly into it. To this, they often added more wood ash or a splash of their own homemade lye water, creating a powerful, caustic brew. The most soiled garments, often the underlinen meant to absorb sweat and grime, were soaked in this harsh liquid first. Then the real labor commenced. A woman would take a heavy, sodden woolen tunic or cloak, lay it on a flat stone at the water's edge, and begin to beat it relentlessly with a wooden tool called a batting club or a washing beetle. This was not gentle agitation. It was a forceful, rhythmic pounding designed to drive the soapy water through the dense fibers and physically hammer the dirt out. Later, the corrugated washboard would appear, but the principle remained the same: abrasive, violent action. She would pound, then rinse the garment in the flowing river, pound again, and rinse over and over, her arms aching, the cold water numbing her hands. The process consumed enormous amounts of time and human energy. A full household wash for a family of 5 could take an entire day of relentless work. This labor was directly tied to the medieval economy. Textiles were wealth. A person's social position was legible in the cleanliness and quality of their woolens. A knight needed presentable tunics and clean surcoats displaying his heraldry. A prosperous merchant's wife required spotless linen headdresses. Even a peasant's Sunday best tunic, though coarse, had to be free of obvious stains and smells to be acceptable for church. The soap that made this possible was therefore an economic linchpin. It preserved the value of cloth, which was often passed down through generations. It maintained the visual codes of a hierarchical society, and it demanded a vast, unseen labor force, primarily female, whose exhausting work at the riverbank upheld the entire system of presentation. The fragrant ball of Castile soap in a noble's chamber and the harsh brown block in a peasant's crock were two ends of the same chain. Both existed to service the most important manufactured good of the Middle Ages: cloth. Soap's story here is stripped of all perfume and mystery. It becomes a tool of pure, demanding utility, a key player in the endless, grinding cycle of work that kept the medieval world from literally wearing its filth on its sleeve. The clean scent on a bishop's robe or a merchant's cloak did not begin in a perfumer's workshop, but in the churning, soap-flecked waters of a cold river, pounded into the fabric by hands that would be raw and cracked by day's end. The relentless pounding at the washboard was a fight against visible filth, but a more subtle battle was being waged in the blood-stained aprons of the barber surgeon. In the dim, crowded space where haircuts and tooth-pulling shared a bench with amputations, soap found one of its most surprising and prescient roles. While the wider medical establishment clung to theories of bodily humors and bad air, a handful of pragmatic practitioners made a quiet, crucial observation. Wounds washed with a soapy solution, especially one infused with certain herbs, often fared better than those left to fester. This was not yet germ theory. It was raw, experiential wisdom, a glimmer of insight that placed soap at the very fringe of medical advancement. The barber surgeon, a figure who combined the roles of groomer, dentist, and emergency physician, was often the first point of contact for injury. His toolkit held razors, lancets, saws, and probes, all of which could introduce corruption into a wound. Some began to adopt a simple, revolutionary pre-surgery ritual. They would take a basin of clean water, shave a generous portion of fine, unscented Castile soap or a strong monastic soap into it, and vigorously scrub their hands and forearms. They would then use this same sudsy water to rinse their instruments. The soap did more than just remove visible dirt. Its alkali helped to break down the invisible films of grease and organic matter where harmful agents could lurk. This practice was shockingly ahead of its time, predating the widespread acceptance of surgical antisepsis by centuries. We find evidence of this in scattered medical texts and surgical manuals. The great medieval surgeon Theodoric Borgognoni, who served as Bishop of Servia in the 13th century, wrote explicitly about the necessity of wound cleansing. While he promoted wine as a primary irrigant for its astringent properties, his protocols emphasized the importance of removing all foreign matter and dead tissue, a philosophy that logically extended to the use of cleansing agents like soap. More directly, a 14th century text on surgery from the school of Salerno advised practitioners to ensure their hands were very clean, and even suggested washing them with soap and hot water before examining a patient, a directive that seems almost modern in its sensibility. Why, then, did this practice not sweep through the medical world and save countless lives? The answer lies in the dominant medical paradigm. Illness was believed to be caused by an imbalance of the body's four humors or by poisonous miasmas in the air. The idea that invisible creatures on a surgeon's hands could cause infection was not just unknown, it was unimaginable within the framework of the time. Soap's benefit was observed but misunderstood. A barber surgeon might faithfully wash his hands because he saw it produced better outcomes, but he would likely attribute the success to the soap's ability to remove malignant influences or to balance the wound's complexion, not to kill microorganisms. His practice was a correct solution derived from a wrong theory. This made the knowledge fragile and localized, a personal habit of the more fastidious practitioner rather than a universal standard of care. The barber-surgeon soap, therefore, represents a fascinating paradox in the history of medicine. It was a tool of genuine, life-saving potential, born from practical observation and wielded with skill. Yet it remained trapped within an ancient explanatory model that could not fully comprehend why it worked. In the busy, often chaotic surgery, the clean scent of a soapy lather was a whisper of a future truth, a small island of empirical practice in a vast sea of theoretical misunderstanding. The very substance that scrubbed the peasant's tunic was, in the right hands, a precursor to antiseptic science, waiting centuries for the world to understand the profound reason behind its simple cleansing power. The barber-surgeon's lather was a local secret, but the soap he used could trace a long journey across the map. Medieval Europe did not have one soap but a continent of them, each bar a direct imprint of its homeland. Where you lived dictated not just how clean you could be, but the very texture and scent of your cleanliness. This was a craft shaped by geography, a story written in olive groves, sheep pastures, and coastal salt marshes. In the sun-baked Mediterranean, the recipe was defined by abundance. Here, the ancient olive tree reigned supreme. Its oil, pressed from ripe fruit, was liquid gold for soap makers. Combined with a potent alkali made from burning coastal plants like saltwort, this created the legendary hard-milled soaps of Castile in Spain and Marseille in France. These were dense, long-lasting bars, naturally pale and incredibly gentle. They lathered richly even in the soft, mineral-light waters of the region, producing a creamy, luxurious foam. Marseille soap, governed by those strict guild laws, became so famous for its purity that its name became a brand centuries before branding existed. A cake of true Marseille soap was a compact treasure, traded across the Mediterranean and prized by merchants and nobles alike. Its clean, mild character was the signature scent of southern sophistication, but travel north beyond the Alps and the recipe transformed completely. In the colder, forested kingdoms of England, Germany, and Scandinavia, olive trees were a fantasy. The fat of choice came from the barnyard, not the orchard. Tallow, rendered from beef or mutton suet, was the workhorse ingredient. Combined with a potassium-based lye leached from the ashes of hardwood fires like oak or beech, it produced a very different product. Northern soap was often softer, sometimes with a gelatinous texture. It could have a distinct musky odor and was less forgiving on the skin, but it was affordable, effective, and it lathered reasonably well in the harder water common in the north. This was the soap of necessity, the tallow block that scrubbed woolens in icy river water and washed the hands of farmers and artisans. Its character was sturdy and utilitarian, a reflection of a climate where survival, not luxury, was the primary concern. Between these two poles flourished centers of specialty and trade. Venice, the merchant queen of the Adriatic, became a hub for the ultimate in soap luxury. Venetian craftsmen did not just make soap, they perfected it as an object of art. They used the finest imported olive oils and the most exotic spices from the East, crafting small, intricately molded cakes that were gilded or stamped with elaborate designs. A Venetian soap ball was a consumable jewel, a testament to the city's vast wealth and its command of global trade routes. Meanwhile, in the dense forests of the Baltic region, another resource drove production: wood. The seemingly endless supply of timber for potash made areas like Poland and Russia centers for ash-based soap production on an almost industrial scale. Their tallow soaps, often shipped in large, coarse blocks, supplied the growing towns and armies of Northern Europe, so your soap was a biography of your landscape. A Spanish noble washed with the essence of sun-drenched groves, an English peasant scrubbed with the condensed essence of his hearth fire and his livestock. A Venetian courtier perfumed himself with the spoils of spice routes. This diversity meant that cleanliness itself had a local flavor, a tangible texture. The quest to get clean was not a uniform experience, but a regional story, where every river, every forest, and every trade wind left its mark on the final humble bar. That clean scent carried a shadow. For all its practical power, the medieval art of soap-making existed in a world where any unexplained transformation could be viewed with deep suspicion. The very process of saponification, turning foul grease and caustic ashes into a cleansing solid, seemed to define nature. To many, this was not chemistry, it was alchemy, a secret art bordering on the magical. The soap maker, working alone in his smoky workshop with his bubbling cauldrons and mysterious tests, fit a dangerous archetype. He was a man who knew hidden recipes, who conversed with corrosive spirits in the lye, and who commanded a change so complete it felt supernatural. In an era where the line between science and sorcery was blurred, his craft could easily be misinterpreted. Whispers might follow a particularly skilled soap boiler, suggesting his consistent success came not from experience but from a pact with darker forces. The use of specific, powerful herbs only deepened this mystery. A soap that healed a stubborn rash where prayers had failed, or one whose fragrance was unnaturally persistent, could be seen as less a medicine and more a charm, a physical spell. This association was not merely paranoid gossip, it had real consequences. During the fevered peaks of witch hunting, the familiar tools of the soap makers trade his cauldron for brewing transformative mixtures. His collection of unusual herbs, his solitary work, mirrored the stereotypical implements of a witch's kitchen. While soap makers were not systematically persecuted, this ambient suspicion meant their guilds guarded their secrets not just for profit but for protection. To be too innovative, to achieve results that seemed too perfect, was to risk attracting the wrong kind of attention. The craft walked a fine line between respected trade and dubious magic, its success dependent on staying useful enough to be needed, but not so mystifying as to be feared. This tension reveals a profound medieval anxiety, the fear that behind every mundane miracle, from a clean shirt to a healed wound, there might lurk a forbidden compact. But the suspicion surrounding soap was not only about its making, it was also about its use. If the process seemed like witchcraft, the act of cleansing itself could be seen as a sin. Within the walls of the church, a fierce debate simmered for centuries around the concept of vanity. While basic cleanliness was encouraged as a sign of spiritual order, excessive attention to the body was condemned as a distraction from the soul. Bathing for pleasure rather than necessity was viewed with deep skepticism by many ascetic theologians. They saw the Roman bathhouse not as a marvel of engineering, but as a temple to fleshly indulgence, a place of idleness, gossip, and licentiousness. The Black Death in the 14th century hardened these attitudes for a time, as many believed hot water opened the pores to deadly miasmas, making frequent bathing a literal mortal danger. But the real target of ecclesiastical ire was often the luxury soap that made bathing delightful. A perfumed ball of Castile soap scented with cinnamon and cloves was not a simple tool, it was an invitation to sensuality. It encouraged a person to linger on the feel and smell of their own skin, to take pride in their physical appearance. This was the sin of luxuria or lust, broadly defined as an inordinate love of worldly pleasure. A chronicler might scornfully note a noblewoman who squandered vast sums on soaps from Venice, her vanity literally washing away coins that could have been given as alms to the poor. The fragrance itself was problematic, as it could be used to attract attention and incite desire, masking the natural, humble scent of a mortal body. To the sternest preachers, the very act of using such a soap was a step away from piety and toward corruption. It represented a world of courtly flirtation and earthly beauty that stood in direct opposition to the virtues of humility, modesty, and contempt for the flesh. So a single bar of soap could sit at a dangerous crossroads. In the workshop, it was a potential artifact of dark alchemy. In the bedchamber, it was a potential instrument of moral decay. It embodied a fundamental conflict of the age, the struggle between the desire for bodily comfort and the fear that such comfort would lead the soul straight into temptation. The cleanest person in the room might, in the eyes of some, be the most morally suspect. That moral suspicion could not stop the undeniable pull of commerce. Beyond its spiritual or hygienic value, soap was a serious economic force, a commodity that fueled trade, filled royal coffers, and built the foundations of early industry. Its journey from a workshop cauldron to a merchant's shelf was a story of tariffs, treaties, and treacherous sea lanes. For governments, soap was not just a cleaning agent, it was a reliable source of revenue. One of the most famous examples was the Spanish alcabola, a comprehensive sales tax levied on all commercial transactions. Every time a block of prized Castile soap changed hands, from the saponnery to the wholesaler, from the merchant to the apothecary, a percentage of its value went directly to the crown. This tax, repeated at every stage, dramatically inflated the final price, ensuring that fine soap remained a luxury only the wealthy could afford. Similar duties existed across Europe, from the gate tolls on soap entering a city to the excise taxes on the raw materials like olive oil or potash. Cleanliness, it turned out, had a very clear price tag, and rulers were keen to collect it. This taxation created a powerful incentive for smuggling and black market production. An unlicensed soap boiler, avoiding the guild's watchful eye, was also avoiding the king's tax collector, making his cheaper, illicit bars highly attractive to cost-conscious innkeepers and households. The battle over soap revenue became a quiet war of wits between state inspectors and underground artisans. The value of soap propelled it along the great trade routes of the medieval and early modern world. Ships leaving the ports of Marseille and Alicante carried crates of hard-milled olive oil soap balls, carefully packed in straw, destined for the markets of London, Bruges, and the Hanseatic towns of the Baltic. These soap balls were compact, durable, and held their value, making them ideal cargo. Overland, carters transported the softer tallow soaps of the north, along with the vital raw material of potash, in slow wagon trains across muddy roads. The trade was a two-way street. The fine soaps of the south moved north, while the ash and animal fats from northern forests and farms moved south to supply soap makers in regions where those materials were scarce. This exchange wove soap into the fabric of continental commerce, making it a common, if costly, sight in market stalls from Seville to Stockholm. The apothecary's shop, with its rows of ceramic jars, would often have a special display for these imported soaps, each variety promising a different kind of cleanliness, from the practical to the extravagant. Where this trade concentrated, it gave birth to something new, the early industrial workshop or saponery. These were not the cottage industries of a single master and his apprentices, but larger, more organized operations. In cities like Marseille, Bristol, or Venice, saponeries began to cluster in specific districts, often near waterways for transport and a ready supply of water for the process. They required significant capital investment, large copper or iron cauldrons, dedicated boiling houses with strong chimneys to vent the acrid fumes, and secure storage for tons of olive oil or barrels of lye. These operations employed dozens of men, from the unskilled laborers who hauled ashes and stirred the endless vats, to the skilled masters who oversaw the critical stages. The saponery became a hub of activity, noise, and distinctive smells, a precursor to the factory system. Its presence attracted related trades, chandlers who used similar fats, barrel makers for storage, and merchants specializing in export. This concentration of industry and employment contributed directly to urban growth and wealth, turning certain cities into synonymous with quality soap. Control of such a profitable and essential industry was a source of immense political power. A city council that governed a major soap-making center held the keys to a significant portion of the local economy. The guilds, in turn, became powerful political bodies, their leaders often serving as city aldermen. The right to produce and tax soap could be a bargaining chip in treaties or a point of contention in wars. Rival cities might impose tariffs on each other's soap to protect their own industries, a form of medieval economic warfare. The intrigue was real, with guilds sending spies to learn competitors' techniques or lobbying monarchs for exclusive patents. A royal grant giving one city a monopoly on soap production within a kingdom could make its merchants fabulously wealthy and its rulers politically unassailable. In this light, a simple bar of soap was far more than a household object. It was a unit of economic energy. It paid for roads and armies, built urban neighborhoods, and shaped the political landscape. The desire to be clean, it seems, was powerful enough to build empires of its own, founded not on conquest but on commerce and the universal human wish to wash the world away. The commerce of soap built empires, but its everyday reality has long since crumbled into dust. How do we know the intimate details of this lost craft? The answer lies not in guild ledgers alone, but in the quiet, patient work of the archaeological detective. The story of medieval soap is a cold case, and the evidence is buried in the most unexpected places. Imagine a team of archaeologists carefully troweling through the compacted earth of a long-vanished workshop. They are not looking for treasure, but for stains and seeds. Their most telling find might be a simple, bell-shaped pit dug into the clay floor, its sides hardened and discolored by a strong alkaline substance. This is a lye-leaching pit, the very heart of the soapmaker's operation. The ghost of that caustic drip has left its chemical fingerprint in the soil, a silent witness to weeks of patient work. Nearby, they might sift through centuries of accumulated debris and find a scattering of tiny, dark seeds. These are not random weeds, they are soapwort seeds. Soapwort, a flowering plant also known as bouncing bet, contains natural saponins that create a lather when its roots and leaves are crushed in water. While not used for hard bar soap, evidence of soapwort tells us that people were experimenting with multiple cleansing methods, using this gentle, plant-based lather for washing delicate fabrics like silk or for personal grooming. It is a reminder that the medieval toolkit for cleanliness was more diverse than we often assume, but the most direct evidence often comes from the humble objects of daily life, pottery. Archaeologists now use a technique called residue analysis. They take a fragment of a coarse, gritty cooking pot or a specialized soap-making cauldron, and with sensitive instruments they can detect microscopic traces of fats and alkalines fused into the ceramic fabric. This is the chemical shadow of a soap batch made 800 years ago. By analyzing the molecular structure of these fats, scientists can sometimes determine if the soap maker used olive oil, animal tallow, or a mixture of both. They can even detect traces of the herbs or essential oils added for scent, identifying the faint chemical echoes of lavender or pine that once filled the workshop air. This turns a broken pot into a recipe book, its invisible text waiting to be read by modern technology. And in extraordinarily rare conditions, the soap itself survives. The anaerobic, oxygen-free environment of a deep latrine or a sealed cesspit can preserve organic materials that would normally rot away. From these unlikely time capsules, archaeologists have recovered small, greasy lumps of what was once soap, now transformed into a hard, soapstone-like material called a saponified mass. Even more dramatic are finds from shipwrecks lying at the bottom of cold, dark seas. Cargoes of trade goods, including barrels of soap balls, have been found preserved in the silt. These bars, though waterlogged and altered, retain their shape and sometimes even the faintest scent of their original perfume. Holding one is an intimate connection to the past, a direct link to the very object someone purchased, unwrapped, and used to wash their hands or their clothes. Each of these clues, the stained pit, the scattered seeds, the chemical residue, the surviving bar, is a piece of a vast puzzle. Archaeologists and historians fit them together with the written records from guilds and apothecaries, slowly reconstructing a practice that was meant to be secret. They can map how recipes changed from region to region, trace the introduction of new ingredients like coconut oil in later centuries, and even identify periods of decline or innovation. This detective work reframes our entire understanding. Our knowledge of medieval soap making is not a complete picture handed down from the past, but a mosaic we are still assembling, one shattered fragment at a time. Every new dig site, every advanced laboratory analysis adds another tile to the image, slowly revealing the full, rich, and surprisingly sophisticated story of how our ancestors fought to be clean. The mystery is not yet solved, but with each clue uncovered, the shadowy figure of the soap maker in his smoky workshop comes just a little more clearly into the light. Those chemical traces in the clay are a silent language, but the medieval soap maker also left behind a more deliberate, if cryptic, record. To follow the written trail of this craft, we must turn to the illuminated pages of herbals and the cheap, Inkai pamphlets known as books of secrets. These manuscripts preserve the recipes, but they do so in a code that mixes the practical with the profoundly mystical. A perfect example comes from the famed 12th century abbess and herbalist Hildegard of Bingen. In her work Physica, she provides a recipe not for hard bar soap but for a cleansing wash. She instructs to take the herb soapwort, crush it in water, and use the lather. But her reasoning is not merely hygienic. She writes that this wash will drive away phantasms and purify a person from the illusions that cling to them. For Hildegard, cleaning the skin was intrinsically linked to cleansing the spirit, a physical act with metaphysical consequences. This intertwining of the material and the magical is the key to deciphering these ancient texts. Later, in the 15th and 16th centuries, the rise of the printing press spread this secret knowledge through cheap, popular booklets. These books of secrets claim to reveal the hidden arts of alchemists and cunning folk to the common man. Their soap recipes are fascinating puzzles. A typical entry might read something like this. Take the grease of a ram, 3 handfuls of ash from an oak burned under a waning moon, and rainwater collected in May. Combine them when the sun is in Leo, stirring always to the east, and speak the Pater Noster 3 times over the mixture. To the modern eye, this seems like pure superstition. But embedded within the ritual is solid, empirical craft. The ram's grease is tallow, a standard fat. Oak ash produces a strong lye. Soft rainwater is ideal. The cryptic instructions often served practical purposes. Storing ash from a specific wood ensured consistency in the alkali's strength. collecting rainwater in spring avoided the pollutants of summer dust. Even the astrological timing, like waiting for the sun in Leo, a fire sign, could be a coded way of saying the mixture must be kept at a consistently high heat during saponification. The prayers or chants recited while stirring, they likely served as a timing mechanism, a way for the solitary soap maker to mark the long, monotonous hours of stirring required to achieve the perfect trace. These rituals transformed a chemical process into a sacred performance, a way to impose order and intention on a dangerous and unpredictable craft. Decoding these manuscripts reveals a worldview where nothing was purely mechanical. The success of the soap depended not just on the quality of the fat and ash, but on the harmony of the craftsman with the natural and celestial order. A mistake was not just a technical failure, it was a sign of being out of sync with the cosmos. This is why the guilds guarded their written records so fiercely, and why masters passed their knowledge orally to apprentices. The true recipe was not just the list of ingredients, it was the lived experience, the intuition for the right moment, the whispered prayer, and the alignment of the stars. For the historian, these manuscripts are therefore doubly valuable. They give us the ingredients, but more importantly, they give us the mindset. They show us that the medieval soap maker saw himself not as a simple chemist, but as an intermediary, channeling the hidden virtues of plants, planets, and prayers into a humble bar of soap. In his hands, every wash was a small act of alchemy, and every clean garment was proof that he had correctly read the secret language of the world. The secret language of the cosmos offered no guarantee. For every perfect bar that emerged from the cauldron, countless batches met a humiliating, greasy end. The medieval soapmaker's craft was a constant gamble with expensive ingredients, and failure was a foul-smelling, costly reality. One of the most common and frustrating disasters was soap that simply refused to harden. Instead of setting into a firm cake, it remained a soft, sticky sludge, useless for cutting or storing. The culprit was almost always weak lye. If the soap maker misjudged his leaching process or used ashes from the wrong type of wood, the resulting lye solution lacked the necessary potency to fully react with all the fat molecules. The saponification process would stall, leaving behind a mass of unreacted grease suspended in a weak, soapy goo. This was a heartbreaking waste, as the precious tallow or oil could not be recovered. The only recourse was to try and salvage the batch by carefully adding a stronger lye solution and reboiling the entire mess, a risky procedure that required perfect timing to avoid creating an equally disastrous opposite problem. That opposite problem was soap that was too harsh, a caustic bar that could literally burn the skin. This occurred when the lye was too strong or when the soap maker, in his haste or miscalculation, used too much of it. The excess alkali did not get neutralized in the reaction, remaining active and corrosive within the finished bar. Washing with such a soap would leave the skin feeling tight, red, and painfully raw. In extreme cases, it could cause chemical burns, especially on the face or sensitive areas. This dangerous failure was a direct threat to the soap maker's reputation. A single batch of burning soap could ruin a master's standing with his customers, who would quickly spread the word of the painful product. Then there was the dreaded separation. After hours of stirring, the soap maker would pour his thick trace into the curing molds, hopeful. But overnight, instead of a uniform block, the mixture would split into distinct, revolting layers. A hard, crumbly crust might form on top, while beneath it lay a pool of oily, unincorporated fat, or a watery, caustic liquid would leach out the bottom. This meant the emulsification had failed. The bond between the fats and the lye had broken, often due to a sudden drop in temperature during cooling or an impurity in the fats themselves. Using rancid tallow or oil that had begun to break down could introduce acids that disrupted the delicate chemical marriage. A separated batch was a total loss, a visual testament to a process gone awry. The causes of these failures were the silent enemies of the craft. Impure fats contaminated with salt or meat scraps could sabotage the reaction. An incorrect ratio, even by a small margin, tipped the balance from soap to salvage. And always there was the human variable, the tired arm that stopped stirring a moment too soon, the distracted glance that missed the precise moment of the trace, the misremembered recipe passed down in a fog of oral tradition. Each foul-smelling failure was more than just a financial blow. It was a blow to the soap maker's confidence and his understanding of the mysterious forces he worked with. It reinforced why the guilds guarded their proven methods so fiercely and why the master's experience was worth more than gold. Every perfect bar that did harden, that lathered richly and cleansed gently, was a small victory over chaos, a temporary alignment of skill, quality, and luck. The clean scent of success was built upon the lingering, acrid memory of all the batches that had gone terribly, expensively wrong. The lingering scent of failure in a medieval workshop was a powerful teacher, but the core recipe it guarded proved astonishingly durable. For over 500 years after the guilds of Marseille stamped their seals, the fundamental alchemy of soap-making remained locked in a pre-industrial loop. Every bar, from the humblest tallow cake to the finest Castile ball, still relied on that same volatile dance between rendered fats and a caustic alkali leached from ashes or burned plants. The scale might increase with larger copper vats in urban saponeries, but the process was recognizably the same one known to a 15th century master. The true revolution, the moment that broke this ancient cycle and paved the way for a modern world awash in soap, came not from a perfumer's shop but from a French chemist's laboratory in 1791. Nicolas Leblanc, seeking a prize offered by the French Academy for a method to produce soda ash from common salt, succeeded. His Leblanc process used salt, sulfuric acid, limestone, and coal to manufacture sodium carbonate on an industrial scale. This was a seismic shift. For the first time in human history, the key alkali for soap was no longer tied to the slow burning of scarce coastal plants or the laborious leaching of fireplace ashes. It could be produced reliably, cheaply, and in virtually unlimited quantities in a factory. This one innovation shattered the resource bottleneck that had kept fine soap a luxury. It decoupled soap making from the local landscape and placed it firmly on the path to mass production. The medieval mystery was finally demystified by chemistry, transformed from an artisanal secret into an industrial formula. Yet, in a beautiful twist of history, the old ways never completely vanished. Look at a pure olive oil bar of soap today, and you are holding the direct descendant of medieval Castile soap. The name itself is a protected designation of origin in Europe, guaranteeing it is made by the same ancient process. Modern brands that champion simple, plant-based formulas are consciously walking in the footsteps of those Mediterranean saponeries, their marketing often evoking a heritage of purity and tradition that stretches back centuries. The tallow soaps of the north evolved into the first industrially produced laundry bars, their practical, no-nonsense character finding a new home in 20th century households. The global commodity on every supermarket shelf wrapped in bright paper is the final chapter of this long evolution, a product so commonplace we forget its epic journey. But the circle is now complete. In our age of mass-produced uniformity, the very artisanal methods the Leblanc process rendered obsolete have been rediscovered as a precious lost art. Small batch soap makers today, often working in home kitchens, consciously revive the medieval craft. They research old recipes, seek out pure oils, hand-blend botanicals for scent and color, and cure their bars for weeks just as the guilds once demanded. They speak of trace of saponification, of the alchemy of turning oils into soap, using the same language, if now fully understood, as their medieval predecessors. In this revival, the mystery returns not as fear or superstition, but as a choice for connection, quality, and tangible craft. The medieval soap maker's ghost, once shrouded in the smoke of his dangerous workshop, now smiles from the shelves of a farmer's market, his ancient art not extinct but reborn as a quiet act of modern rebellion. The ghost of that medieval workshop can be summoned in your own kitchen. To truly understand the craft, let us recreate a small piece of it, a simplified version of a medieval herbal soap that honors the old ways while respecting modern safety. Our goal is not historical purity, but to touch the process, to see the transformation from separate oils into a unified, fragrant bar. First, we gather our ingredients, the modern equivalents of the soap maker's treasures. Instead of rendering tallow, we use pure olive oil, the heart of Castile soap, for its gentle, timeless quality. For the transformative alkali, we bypass the dangerous leaching barrel entirely, using a pre-measured container of sodium hydroxide lye solution, a precise and safe modern substitute for the unpredictable potash of old. Safety is paramount, so we wear gloves and goggles, just as a wise soap maker would have valued his own skin and sight. Now, the herbs. We take dried rosemary, its needle-like leaves once believed to purify both body and spirit, and fragrant lavender buds, chosen for calm and cleanliness. We will not just stir them in, we will steep them. Gently warming a portion of our olive oil, we add a generous handful of each herb, letting the warm oil pull out their scent and properties over low heat for an hour until the kitchen smells like a medieval garden. This infused oil is our link to the apothecary's art. Once the oil cools and we strain out the herbs, we carefully combine it with the remaining plain oil in a sturdy, heat-safe container. Now comes the alchemical moment. With great care, we slowly pour the pre-made lye solution into the oils and we begin to stir. This is not a casual mix. We stir with a steady, rhythmic motion, just as the medieval craftsman did with his wooden paddle. We watch as the clear, separate liquids slowly cloud and thicken. Minutes pass, then more minutes, the mixture turning opaque and creamy. We lift our stirrer and let a ribbon of the soap batter drizzle back onto the surface. At first, it sinks without a trace, but we keep stirring, and soon that drizzle leaves a faint, momentary line before disappearing. This is the trace, the same sign the medieval soap maker waited for, the signal that the saponification reaction is firmly underway. At this perfect moment, we can add a final sprinkle of whole lavender buds for beauty, stirring them gently into the thick, pudding-like batter. Then we pour. We scrape our fragrant, pale green batter into a simple wooden mold lined with parchment, just as a soap maker might have used a carved trough. We smooth the top, cover it lightly, and set it aside in a quiet place. For 24 hours it will sit, the reaction completing its work, the heat of the process slowly fading. After a day, we can unmold it, revealing a solid, herb-speckled loaf of soap. But the process is not finished. This new soap must now cure, resting in a cool, dry place for 4 to 6 weeks. This curing time allows excess water to evaporate and the soap to harden fully, becoming mild and long-lasting. Each week it transforms, becoming firmer to the touch, its scent mellowing from sharp to soft. When you finally hold that finished bar, you are holding the result of the same fundamental magic, a safe, modern echo of a 1,000-year-old craft. You have witnessed the trace, smelled the herbal infusion, and felt the patience required. This simple bar connects your hands directly to the hands of those who stirred the cauldrons in the smoke-filled workshops, a tangible thread of history, chemistry, and care. Walk into a crowded marketplace on a hot afternoon, and the air would have hit you in waves. First, the sharp, earthy reek of animals, of unwashed wool and leather soaked with sweat. Then, the sweet, rotten smell of discarded fish heads and vegetable scraps stewing in the gutter. Overlaying it all was the dense, smoky odor of wood fires from 100 cookpots, mixing with the dust churned up by cartwheels and passing feet. This was the baseline scent of medieval public life, a complex, overwhelming fog of organic decay and human industry. But then, a counterpoint. As you passed the stall of an apothecary or a specialized soap seller, the olfactory landscape shifted. Here a clean, green aroma cut through the murk. It was the scent of rosemary and lavender, of crushed sage and pine resin, all pressed into pale cakes of olive oil soap. This was not just a smell, it was a sensation, a sudden clearing in the sensory storm. To a nose accustomed to the constant background hum of decay, that herbal sharpness would have been startlingly vivid, a direct signal of purity and care. It marked the stall as a place of value where the commodities sold were not mere sustenance, but tools for transformation. A customer might lift a cake of soap to their face, inhaling its fragrance as a promise, a portable piece of order they could carry back into the chaotic world. The soap's scent was a tiny, powerful rebellion against the environment, a declaration that cleanliness was possible even here. Move from the public chaos of the market to the semi-private world of the bathhouse, and the sensory experience deepened. These were not the silent, sterile temples of hygiene we imagine today, but lively, social spaces, often rowdy and communal. The air would be thick with steam, warm and damp against the skin. In that humid blanket, odors became amplified. You would smell the mineral tang of the water itself, the faint, musty scent of wet stone and wooden tubs. Most potently, you would smell the people, the collective scent of bodies and hair softened by the heat. But rising above this human bouquet was again the fragrance of soap. Not a single note, but a chorus. One man might be using a coarse tallow bar scented with thyme, its pungent, medicinal aroma cutting through the steam. Another might have splurged on a finer ball perfumed with imported citrus rind or cloves, leaving a spicy, exotic trail in the damp air. The act of washing was a public performance of personal care, and the scent of your soap was your auditory cue in the room. It told others what you could afford and perhaps how you wished to be perceived. That clean, herbal or spicy scent mingling with the steam and the social chatter created a unique sensory capsule. For a short while, the bather was immersed in warmth, community, and the affirming smell of cleanliness, a temporary island of pleasure carved out of the weekly grind. The soap was the key that unlocked this experience, transforming a functional wash into a sensory ritual. Finally, step into the private chamber of a noble or wealthy merchant. Here, the sensory goal was control. The outside world, with its unpredictable stenches, was to be held at bay. Rushes strewn with sweet-smelling herbs like meadowsweet and mint covered the floor, releasing their fragrance when crushed underfoot. Bunches of lavender and rosemary might hang from the beams to deter insects and perfume the still air. A fire of sweet-burning applewood or cherrywood would scent the hearth. In this carefully curated olfactory environment, the role of soap was subtler but no less vital. It was the final, personal layer of this scented world. After a bath, the noble skin would carry the faint, lingering perfume of a fine Castile soap, perhaps infused with rose petals or sandalwood. This was not a smell to cut through grime, but to blend with the other refined scents of the chamber, creating a seamless aura of cultivated elegance. The clean scent on their person was intimate and constant, a whisper of luxury that moved with them. It signaled that they existed in a state of permanent separation from the foulness of the common world. Their cleanliness was not a momentary achievement, but a sustained condition. In this context, soap transcended its function. It became an instrument of personal atmosphere, a way to carry a bubble of sensory refinement wherever they went. From the market stalls' bold declaration to the bathhouses' shared luxury to the noble's private aura, soap did more than clean. It sculpted the very air people breathed, offering small, precious islands of sensory delight in a world that was, so often, overwhelmingly foul. That clean, herbal scent was more than a personal luxury, it was a cultural whisper. While soap rarely took center stage in the grand epics and chronicles of the Middle Ages, its subtle presence in stories and art reveals how deeply this humble object was woven into the fabric of daily life and aspiration. In the shimmering world of medieval romance, for instance, soap appears not in the grime of battle, but in the rituals of courtly love and hospitality. When a weary knight arrived at a noble castle, his welcome was a carefully staged performance of refinement. Before a feast, servants would present him with a basin of scented water and a fine, perfumed soap ball. This was not merely about hygiene, it was a symbolic cleansing from the dust of the road and the violence of the outside world, preparing him to enter a civilized space of conversation and courtly manners. The soap here is a prop in a social drama, marking the transition from chaos to order, from the profane to the refined. Its quality silently commented on the host's wealth and generosity. A legendary account of a visit by the Holy Roman Emperor to a French duke might lavishly describe the gift of a silver basin and a dozen soap balls scented with ambergris, their extravagant fragrance a direct challenge to the ordinary smells of the world. This object of care even found its way into religious art, carrying layered meanings. In many depictions of the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel visits the Virgin Mary, artists included a basin and a ewer of water. While not always explicitly soap, these vessels symbolize her purity and readiness. In a culture that linked physical and spiritual cleanliness, the implication is clear. She is the human vessel made spotless, prepared for a divine purpose. In secular paintings, especially those from the wealthy merchant classes of the Renaissance, soap makes a more direct appearance. Scenes of domestic life, like a woman preparing for a bath, might show a small, pale cake of soap resting on a ledge or in a dish. It is a quiet detail, a testament to a rising bourgeois value, the comfort and privacy of the home. These visual clues tell us that by the late Middle Ages, soap had ascended from a dangerous alchemical product to a recognizable symbol of domestic tranquility and personal dignity. Yet for all these glimpses, soap's most telling role is often played by its absence. It is the missing character in most records, chronicles detailed battles, treaties, and miracles, not the annual rendering of tallow or the price of potash. Household accounts from great manors might carefully list expenditures for spices, wax, and cloth, but soap was often lumped into a generic category for sundry goods or simply made at home, leaving no paper trail. This silence is itself a powerful statement. It speaks to soap's mundane, essential nature. Like bread or firewood, it was a foundation of daily life, so common it was often beneath mention. Its story was written in the hands of the women who made it, in the ledgers of apothecaries who sold it, and in the sensory memory of those who used it, not in the parchments of kings. This very invisibility makes its occasional appearance in a poem or a painting all the more significant. When it does surface, it is never just soap, it is always an idea. It is civilization pushing back against the wild, order against disorder, the self against the collective filth of the age, so we must listen to these whispers. In a world documented by the loud events of power and faith, the quiet story of soap is a testament to a different, persistent human drive. It is the story of the desire for a small sphere of control, for a moment of sensory pleasure, for the simple, profound dignity of feeling clean. In the relentless chaos of medieval life, with its plagues, its wars, and its overwhelming odors, the act of washing with a fragrant bar was a quiet rebellion. It was an individual claiming, if only for a moment, a personal territory of order and peace. The soap maker, therefore, was not just a craftsman, but an unsung provider of that small freedom. His dangerous, smoky art produced the tools for a private, daily renaissance, a silent but essential character in the long, human story of building comfort from chaos. From the bubbling cauldrons of ancient Babylon to the guarded workshops of Marseille, the story of medieval soap is a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming filth. We have followed its journey from a fringe alchemical curiosity to a cornerstone of daily life, watched as it passed through the hands of monks, guild masters, and housewives, each adding their own layer of meaning to its creation. This was never a simple craft. It was a sophisticated, vital, and deeply mysterious art that existed at a unique crossroads. It blended hard chemistry with the soft science of botany, the brutal realities of medieval economics with the shimmering fears of superstition. A single bar could be a healer's remedy, a merchant's cargo, a noble status symbol, and a sinner's temptation all at once. The clean scent that rose from a washing bowl was the final note in a complex symphony of labor, trade, danger, and belief. It speaks to a world where every object, no matter how humble, carried the weight of its own intricate story. So the next time you unwrap a bar of soap, pause for a moment. Hold it in your hand. You are not just holding a cleaning agent, you are holding a fragment of history, a direct link to the daily struggles, the small luxuries, and the quiet, determined dignity of people who lived centuries ago. Their desire for order, for comfort, for a moment of sensory grace in a difficult world is a desire we still understand perfectly. What other forgotten medieval mysteries or traditional crafts would you like us to explore? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to join us for more deep dives into the hidden arts that built our world.